Man, what a sad day for us, man, with
It is.
Popovich, brother. Man,
It is. I mean,
so
it's
much has been running through my mind, Patrick. So much.
it is because it's not wildly unexpected, but you kind of wanted that right off into the sunset. You were always hoping, okay, just come back for one more season, and then Wimby's going to be healthy, and then we'll put it all together. And we'll be back in the playoffs, and then you can pass the team off as a playoff team and ready to go start trying to win championships. And it just it makes sense. He's getting older. He had a stroke, and then he had another episode in a restaurant, and just like trying to travel and do an 82 game schedule. It's not smart to do to try
It's
and do
hard on
that.
the
So,
body, even if you're not playing, let alone the
yeah,
stressors, the mental health of it. My thing, though, is we haven't seen him publicly, right? Us as
yeah,
fans, selfishly, right? So the last time we saw him was on the bench, you know,
yeah.
X amount of months ago at the beginning of the season. So it's just crazy that, in typical Spurs fashion, they announced the replacement like 15 minutes after they tell us Pop
Yes.
is moving to team president. That's the most Spursian thing ever.
They didn't want the headline to be who's the next coach. They were like, let it be Pop, and don't make a headline where now all the stories are who's going to be the next coach. Done. It's done and dusted. Let's talk about Pop. Let's have a good day about talking about Pop.
It's been emotional, man. Seeing Manu's face, like Manu with hair before the sunroof was open. Seeing Timmy, seeing Tony, seeing a young Kawhi Leonard, seeing Danny
Yes.
Green, seeing Sean Elliott, seeing the Admiral. This man, do we got to talk about the period of basketball? I'm 36 years old.
Yeah.
Pop was our head coach for the last 29 years, 29
29
seasons,
years. Most of our adult
29
life.
years. So
Well,
you
our
really
entire
meant
adult life, but
our
most of our
entire
life.
adult life, he has been the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs and a staple of success in the aspect of team sports. When you think about the amount of success, the winning percentage, being a championship contender almost every year of that until the recent years where we're building under Wimby. But you think about the periods of basketball, right? We went from the late '90s post Jordan Pop, right? Pop
Yes.
with the Twin Towers, post Jordan Spurs. We win immediately with Tim. We transition to the rivalry with Kobe and Shaq, right? Into, as Zay just talked about, the 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns. And that also coincides with the muck up period of basketball with the Detroit Pistons. Into the LeBron Miami era, into the Steph Golden State Warriors era. Like, that feels like it scales. It does, and it's 30 years of basketball, Patrick.
Yeah. No, and I mean it's crazy to think that all those years ago that the Spurs almost fired him and hired Doc Rivers. Like that's still the craziest that he was a road trip that if he lost, they were ready to hire a young Doc Rivers to come in and coach the team. And you just think about the catastrophic difference in our lives if that happens. If they lose
The
that
Heat
game,
was on. He bet on himself back then. He bet
he
on
did.
himself.
I
He made
mean,
himself the coach.
I'll say there's a great series that the Spurs did for their 50th anniversary or whatever it was of 50th, 75th or whatever. What the Ring of the Row is a series they did on YouTube, and it's like 50 different episodes of all this stuff about the Spurs, and it's really cool. But they talk about how he even got the job because he'd been brought in by Larry Brown when Larry Brown took the job. Larry Brown had brought him up when Larry Brown was at Kansas and had basically found Pop, and he was coaching at a D3 school, and he was like, take a year to come up and coach with me, and you'll learn a lot, and then you can go back. And Pop was like, I'm just going to coach D3 basketball forever. I enjoy this. The paycheck's good enough. I don't need an extravagant life. That's what he was
For
going
the
to do.
love of the game.
The love of the game. And so he was going to do that. Larry Brown then takes him to Kansas, and then Larry Brown gets a Spurs job, leaves Kansas to go to San Antonio, and takes Pop and R.C. Buford with him. And those guys are still part of the team, but Pop's there as an assistant, and then Larry Brown's gone. He's gone. He goes off, and he's in Golden State, I believe. And the Spurs at the time, Red McCombs had sold the team, but he had sold the team where he didn't want to sell it. He basically allowed San Antonio to put a bid together as a city to keep the team, and it was a bunch of the companies there, and the head of USAA was really big in San Antonio. He basically ran the team, and he knew Pop from Air Force Academy. So that was the reason Pop got the job. Was he probably wasn't the most qualified or best, but that's how he got the GM job back in the day, was that he knew a guy from the Air Force Academy that was like, this guy loved basketball. He's a smart guy. And they brought him in. And the story from that point on is so crazy about what he's been able to do, his impact in the community, his impact in civil rights, and, and just trying to be a different voice and really kind of changing the landscape of what coaches can say and do in press conferences. He changed a lot of that because other people didn't have the balls.
He's one of the most important men in NBA history. He really is. You cannot tell the story of the NBA without Gregg Popovich when it comes to a lot of the tactics that are used today, whether people like them or not. When it comes to being, like you said, I'm so glad you brought up the civil rights aspect and him always being outspoken, always for the militaristic element and the discipline that he's always brought to the table. He has always been pro player, whether it's physically, whether it's on and off the court. He has always been pro player. You see, nobody has the way that he gets hugs and the relationships and the daps, former players, right?
Yeah.
Guys that played for him 10, 15 years ago. When they see Pop, it's love. It's always love. When they talk about the stories of Pop, if you get caught with him out in public, he will pay for your meal. If you're a former player or a current player,
there's stories about players that would try and find out where he was because they knew he would pay for their meal. And so there were certain players that would try and figure out where he was at so that they could go get a free meal. And he'd still do it because that was who Pop was, or Pop is, we should say. He's not passed away. He's just not.
Yeah. He's back kind of to the front office, right? Team president.
Yeah.
I look at this, and I don't know how you feel about this, but with Mitch Johnson being named the head coach, who was our interim coach this past season when Pop went down, I look at this as kind of like the Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra type relationship potentially, or kind of, hey, his blessing. From my understanding, I don't know what you've heard, but it sounded like Wemby also signed off on Mitch Johnson as well. And the organization just seems to be in alignment, regardless of how you feel about Mitch Johnson. I know I have some thoughts, but it's just interesting that you have the Pat Riley. That's immediately where my mind went to when it came to naming Mitch Johnson as his official successor.
I agree. I think it was, this is a guy that I'm sure there was parts of them working lockstep to this year. And, how are you going to take a team that we've worked together to build and then I disappeared, but you have to be part of it. And then we'll have conversations, but we can't go too far into it and all of that and what he's been able to do. And then, to have the team have his back. And I think it was you don't want to rock the boat. And I know we're in an age of everybody wants the big hire and everybody wants this will be the last piece and that'll make a difference. But when we looked at the names, I think Becky Hammon's going to be a good NBA coach one day, but to throw her in that situation is not really fair. And for Mitch Johnson, he's already there. You're not rocking the boat. It's kind of keeping status quo. It's everything's good. But anyone you put into that situation, if they're a big name, they're set up to fail. Because if you coach for 15 years and win 4 NBA championships, you weren't able to beat Pop. You really, and I mean, the reality is if you go the next 5-6 years and you don't, you're in the playoffs, but you can't make a run, are you still going to be the coach? I know the Spurs have stuck by guys, but that's kind of because Pop was a different breed. And, if Pop doesn't win the 99 championship, we don't know if he's there for 03. Right. And, if he doesn't, keep winning those, he definitely doesn't stay. But by the time he's won all of those, he can get to 14, 15, and you can get into those championship year, the years in the NBA finals again. So there's reasons why he was able to think.
Do you think the expectation is any different if Victor Wembanyama is not a member of this franchise?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think if he's not, because then you're working into, because at that point you're still trying to rebuild or find what your next person is, or, I think if you don't already have the answer, because at that point you're not trading for De'Aaron Fox either.
Exactly.
And then you have Michelle, Keldon Johnson, and Jeremy Sohan, and a bunch of okay players that, you're competing in the Utah division now. You're in that world. So you don't want to be in that world, and that's why you have Wemby. So, but he is. You want to keep your stars happy. If Wemby is is on board with Mitch Johnson. I think that I said there could have been pieces of Chris Paul maybe testing those waters with having him on the team this year. I know Chris Paul wants to keep playing, so he wasn't ready to move over into that position. Becky Hammond's in the WNBA. It's a really hard move to put her in and institute her back over there. But and then the other names, you're like, are you going to go get Bill Self? Is that such an upgrade over what Mitch Johnson's going to do when they have to change up everything that they've been doing?
And that's another person with health problems. That's another, you know what I mean? Like I had Buddy hit me up and say, well, let's take a look at, let's hit up Dan Hurley at UConn. And I'm like, the organization, temperament matters too. And Dan Hurley obviously is a great coach, back-to-back national champion, but that temperament he has there, he might be wound a little too tight for 82-game NBA season. Like, I don't know how that would, and it's crazy is Pop. That's the beauty of Popovich though, right? Is he was so adaptive as a coach over time. All those eras I named were different eras of styles of basketball that he consistently shifted the Spurs alongside Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan was a big part of this as well. I don't want to shortchange that. But he was always able to adapt our organization wherever we needed when he had the top tier talent. And now that we have Victor Wembanyama here, another top tier generational talent, people want to know that he's going to be in the right hands and the Spurs are going to do the right thing. And I think everybody knows that the Spurs are one of the better organizations to have somebody like that with. It's just now Mitch having the keys to this with these draft picks. What does San Antonio decide to do? A lot of rumors about a Giannis Antetokounmpo, a Kevin Durant, right? Like, how are they going to supplement this roster to make them contenders? Can Mitch Johnson handle all that? And the other thing with Coach Becky, I love Coach Becky. I think timing matters too, Patrick. I think if this had happened, if Pop has a stroke, let's say a year removed when she first went to Las Vegas, to coach that team before she ended up winning the WNBA championship, I think maybe freshly removed from the NBA, she's more susceptible to pop back in. She's now a few years removed from being a part of the organization. Things have changed a little bit, right? So
they have, and it's also, and I mean, and you also got to throw in for her, I think Pop wants her to write her own story. And so there is a bit of it to where if it all does work out, and you're right, if the timing of it does work out, where she's been with the Vegas Aces for a while and now maybe she's ready to move on from that, and maybe the Spurs are moving on from Mitch Johnson or whatever, situation happens, then you could see it happen. But I think right now it's not necessarily the case. And we're seeing a lot more teams not want to go out and get the Boyster his coach anymore. We just saw the Grizzlies just promote their interim coach. We saw Sacramento promote their interim coach. Like, a lot of people are just like, hey, the players like you. Cool. That's what we want now. We got rid of Mike Malone in Denver because the players didn't like him anymore. We want our players to be happy. We're paying them $80 million in a couple years. Our star players are going to make 60, 70, $80 million for a max player. You're going to make 7. Guess which one's more important to me right now? And so if that person doesn't like you, you're out. And so Wemby's going to be one of those guys who in 5-6 years, you'll be making 60, 70 million dollars. He could very well be the first $100 million player. If he stays healthy,
100%.
he could be in that conversation. Maybe it'll be Luka because he's just got so many awards. But when you get awards young and you come in the league young and you get those awards, you're going to be so fast-tracked in today's CBA to get that huge, huge money. And it's, and then people, the TV rights keep going up. I mean, that'll at some point probably take some sort of a bath for everybody because it seems like that's not possible, but who knows we keep going. CB says, I always thought Becky Hammond would take over for him. I thought, too, at that time, that made more sense, but the timing of it just kind of passed, and it would have been a retread then. And for her to go, okay, we're going to be the first head coach, but you're doing it because of Pop's health, and it's this weird kind of thing. And I think her being able to go and follow her own path is what she's going to be able to do. The one I'm curious is, I think if she follows another really legendary coach, Miami could be a place where she ends up, depending on if Pat Riley stays there or not. There's a certain other teams that you just say maybe she could fall into that place. Oh, no, I think we may have lost Steven there for a minute. We'll see if he gets his. There he is. I can hear him.
Yeah,
I don't see your. I can hear you. I don't see your picture moving, but I can hear you.
Oh, yeah, we are having some very crazy storms up here in DFW, so
Oof.
bear with me, y'all. But yeah, I mean, with Becky, I completely agree with you, Patrick. Blazing your own path and just the ability for her to develop her story. She's already have an incredible story with what she did do in the NBA and transitioning to the WNBA. Also, the WNBA, the growth of their game, right?
Yeah.
She's a part of that narrative too. That's very, very critical to the success and growth of their sport as they start to make more money and go up the income chain. So we'll see what happens there. Taylor Jenkins, I know I was interested in him because he was the former All-Spur head coach and came up development-wise within our program. I was interested
Yep.
there. Mike Malone, obviously being a former NBA champion, resonates. But some of these guys, I mean, you see real quick. I mean, people brought up Coach Bud, right? Does that move the needle anymore? He's been fired twice, right? I
No,
know
and
he's a former Spur.
he was the worst guest speaker at Spurs basketball camp all time. That was God. His speech was terrible. When I was a kid and he was doing this, I can't remember what it was. All I remember was it was like when he said eyes.
Coach Bud put you to sleep.
No, because when he say eyes, you had to clap, and when he said ears, you had to stomp. And so it was just this really boring speech. But then he knew it was boring, so then he would say eyes and ears, so you have to do something. It was so bad. And it was like,
oh my God,
a group of kids, and we're all just like, come, we just want to play basketball and you're not. I can't even remember what it was now. I mean, that's 30 something years ago, but probably. So maybe that's why I don't remember it. But I remember that it was extremely boring, and everybody left like that was not fun. Get more of the players to come. The players are fun. Those guys are good.
Let me ask you this, Patrick. In terms of, I'll be honest with you. I was not fired up about the Mitch Johnson news. He is a young coach.
I get it.
Yeah, and I get it. I will support him. I'm not going to say I want to support him. I will support him.
Yeah.
It is different now that you're the head coach versus the interim, especially when the opportunity knocked for him. It was under crazy circumstances. A trade happens. Wemby goes down. There's a lot of things that happen, right? But there's a lot of improvement I'd like to see from him coaching wise when I look at what I want from my NBA head coach. My question is, what do you surround him on that bench? Maybe that could be a place for somebody like Bud. I mean, I think you got to arm them with a lot of, former experience and guys around him that can help, strengthen that bench for next season. What do you think?
I mean, I'd see, maybe a Mike Brown coming back since he's out in Sacramento.
Oh, yeah.
Like
he's
that's
available. I love Mike Brown.
Yeah, and he's really liked, and he's Pop's a big fan of his as well. So that's a name that I think kind of makes sense in that world. But I mean, it's going to be curious too, because like Mike Malone and we can talk about like all those guys are. I think that there's going to be a little stigma around them for like a year or so because they're not player friendly, and that's why they were fired. Was because they were being too hard on the players, and that is not what they want in the league anymore, or a lot of owners don't. And so I don't know if you'd necessarily go that way right away, and maybe those guys don't want to come back as an assistant right away. You may get some more veteran guys in there. You may try and but I think Mike Brown would probably be my first shout of a guy that has ties to the Spurs, could enjoy coming back for a year and just being like, no, I'll be a part of this. He's usually a player favorite as well. So that would be my shout of who I would guess would be like the veteran coach.
100% strengthens us X and O wise on that bench as well. What he did in Sacramento, he's the only person that's really turned that organization around, that dumpster fire of an NBA franchise led over there by Vivek. He's the only person that's had any modicum of success in the last 20-something years. So I'd be more than happy to have Mike Brown back home here in San Antonio.
And let's also throw in, wasn't that when they fired Mike Brown that De'Aaron Fox was like, well, I'm not coming back?
Yes.
So that also plays into it. If he's a Mike Brown guy and De'Aaron Fox, and you just got De'Aaron Fox on your team, then that adds another piece that I didn't even really put into that. But
it's par for the course for the Sacramento Kings. Unserious franchise.
Hey, I'm just shocked they're still in Sacramento. Aren't we all still shocked they're still in Sacramento? This was a team that the Maloof brothers were going to move to Vegas like 20 years ago, and they're still there. I don't get it, but it's a sad day for us Spurs fans because it is the end of an era. of literally our entire adult lives. I'm 40
In all
years old,
seriousness.
and my adult life has been Popovich was a coach, and it was a standard. There's just so many, like, the stories of how he did things. Of, like, I always love the stories that he would, give his assistant coaches bottles of wine to take on the road, and he would be like, "All right, you got to take it." And the reality was, part of it was he likes wine, but it was to make you care about something that you don't necessarily care about. And you have to take really good care of something that's not yours, that you don't care. Like, you don't care about having the wine, but now you can't check your bag, or you got to make sure that this bottle's safe because your job's kind of on the line. And using that as the analogy of, now you need to care about that. You need to do that for all these players. When they have issues at their home, or when they have things that are really important to them, I know it may seem stupid because they're 22, 23-year-old kids to you, but it matters, because if they get turned off to you, they're not going to be listening to you when you're telling them, when you're trying to teach them post moves, and when you're trying to teach them how to slide their feet better, or a new defense, or anything else. They're going to zone you out because they're like, man, this guy don't care about me. He's just going through the motions. And so stuff like that Pop was just so ahead of his time, and still, I mean, just really smart about doing the, like, he would always have tables at team dinners. He never wanted to have, like, the big table. His concept was tables over 6 people. It then breaks into where you can have separate conversations at the table. But if it's 6 people or less, then everyone's involved in the conversation. It's one conversation. So we would split them up into tables of 6 or 4 so that it was one conversation. So it's not just a bunch of people in 1 or 2 person conversations. Right. So just stuff like that is kind of outside the game of basketball, but why the Spurs organization is what they are, why players speak so highly of it, or if you're Steven Jackson, hate it. I'm sure there's a few
depending
others,
on what day of the week you talk to Steven Jackson, because he can be all over the place when it comes to the Spurs and Gregg Popovich.
No, we'll see his statement where he's like, yeah, but you should have played me more. And we're like, all right, this is just about you, that I think you're missing the points.
I just want to express my gratitude, though, to the San Antonio Spurs and Greg, and just everything that we've seen over the last 30 years. And again, first-class organization, how they've handled this. My lifetime, I've always kind of seen Pop run in parallel to one Bill Belichick. And seeing how that situation has unfolded post New England and Bob Kraft and whatever is going on at North Carolina with Mrs. Jordan Hudson, juxtaposed to how we're moving with Pop in this age of where he is no longer a head coach. I'm grateful for it. He's never embarrassed us, right? Like, there's never been a situation where you're like, dang, man, fall from greatness or anything like that. Like, even him going into the team president role, us knowing his physical limitations, this is what I expect, and they're very mindful of how that PR reflects. So I am grateful for that as a fan.
Yeah, I mean, it is to allow them, what Peter Holt allowed them to do for so many years, and then pass it down. The kids have done a good enough job of keeping it up, and then I know I don't live in the city, so the taxes are going to be different for me. But if they're able to build that gigantic new place downtown, and keep the Spurs in San Antonio, it'll be really, really awesome. And that he is a huge, huge part of that, because small market teams like San Antonio, there's been multiple times that they've almost moved out of that city. And having somebody that's so tied to the city, and have somebody that, keeps pursuing excellence. And even when the team's bad, you still have faith because it's Gregg Popovich. Like, that's a huge thing to keep that team not being, the Seattle Spurs or some other team like that, where they move around and they take our team. I know it's been discussed. I mean, there was also people that said they were going to be the Austin Spurs. I'm like, I don't think that's going to happen, guys, but
I think they're leveraging Austin the way they should be, and Mexico the way they should be, right? But I think they're doing it very tactfully and smart. There's nothing wrong with gaining market share, but the team shouldn't be going anywhere. And I think with the facility they're building downtown, and then just recently hosting the Final Four, it's a good sign of where San Antonio's headed.